Hi, this is Bobby from Heavyweights Mountain Biking. Today we're going to do a little more mechanicking stuff. We're going to be swapping out a RockShox Monarch shock that just has dampening on it. It doesn't have a lockout, for the X Fusion with a remote lockout. The remote lockout is actually what I've been wanting. My forks are a remote lockout. I have a lever for a remote lockout, and the way the geometry on my bike is, when I'm pedaling without a lockout, it does give a lot of bob, and you feel it, and it makes you exhausted. So we're going to swap this out. Hang with us today and check it out. As we stated, it was going to be this RockShox Monarch R that's going to get removed and replaced with the X Fusion shock. A lot of people might be going, well, why would you be trading a RockShox for an X Fusion? Well, X Fusion is up and coming name brand. You'll find them on a lot of your entry-level to mid-level mountain bikes now when you buy them brand new. And we're going to give it a shot. Like I say, I want a remote lockout, and that's the bottom line. The shock we're going to be installing is the X Fusion O2 Pro with a remote lockout, so that's the RLR. It's the proper length. It's a 165 by 38 with a 22 millimeter bolt pattern for the shocks, and you can see the remote mechanism there. We're going to begin with taking the old shock off. I'll probably forward fast through some of this because it's just a couple of 5mm bolts, and start loosening it. We're going to mount the X Fusion with this part down so that it has access from the remote. Since we're going back on, if any of this thread lock is no longer tight, we're going to add just a little bit more, because we don't want the shock bolts to work their way out. Before we tighten it down to the proper Newton meter, we're going to go ahead and get the front one installed as well. I'm going to add some thread lock to this as well. Again, I'm not going to torque it down to its torque settings just yet. That'll be coming up here in a second. I want to make sure that I have enough cable housing and everything for both the front lockout and the rear lockout. I wanted to make sure I had my purple cables to go with these. The only ones that should be black should be my hydraulics, because I just can't find purple hydraulic hoses. But these two here should fit just fine. That one will have to be cut down, and this one will have to be cut down. So we have two purples that'll make the proper length. According to the specs, and checking with Calvin and Truman from Park Tool, about 6 Newton meters is all you're going to want to do. If you over tighten them, you can shear off the heads on your bolts or snap them in half. Also, bolts tend to stretch and their threads tend to stretch, so it doesn't create the same bond. If you take your shock on and off a lot, you also might want to consider taking or buying replacement bolts every now and then. It's just a smart thing to do. To feed it through, I am going to use the Part 2 IR I.2 or 1.2. It is the feeding or snake cords to feed the lines through your frame. This one doesn't have tubes pre-built into it, so it is going to be kind of a fish job, so don't laugh if you see me do several attempts. I've only used this kit one other time, and that was to feed these through when I was first building the kit or the bike about a year ago. So again, don't laugh. I mean, it'll be funny. If you can't help yourself, laugh, because if nothing else, maybe I could be some joy. First thing I'm going to do is take that longer piece that I had found, and I'm going to twist this into the end. Maybe. Looks like my cutter damaged this one pretty good. Let me clean it up a little bit. Alright, let's try this again. I'm going to twist this into the end here. And it makes a pretty good bond to help pull through. The other thing I'm going to do is take off these little caps here, because these have a tendency to block the flow. But you got to make sure that you feed them onto your line in the proper sequence as well. Otherwise you're going to be redoing that. Or a lot of times they can go over the end. That's easy enough, as long as you don't put your ferrules on the end of it yet. We don't have far to go, but it's got to go at a weird angle. These holes were cut weird. The top one actually is my rear shifter over here, and that was technically the one that goes over here. The frame is geared toward an English standard, where your rear brake is on your left side and your front brake is on your right side. So we'll feed this through, see how it works. And actually all I had was those ferrules. I had one metallic one that was just looked a little bigger, but it was the same tightness. So what I'm going to do here is just clean back the plastic a little bit so that it butts up against the ferrule on the outside diameter, and the inside diameter can go inside. The biggest thing is that we want this metallic part to push up against the ferrule, so that when we go to tune it and snug it up, it's all proper. Gives it the proper tension so that it's right. Let's see. There we go. That's what we want. See, the only thing that the ferrule really does, because this is a metallic push point and so is the internal part of this cable, so it can push up against itself. What this ferrule does is actually help keep the water and the gunk from going back down the cable line, so that it stays smooth on the inside. And that's what that does. Okay. I'm going to clean out the end here. Make sure that cable has somewhere fresh and easy to go. That looks like a tight squeeze there. We're going to have to do some trimming. For those of you that don't know how a cable works, there's an inner plastic sleeve in which the cable runs through, and then this metallic coil over that plastic sleeve helps keep it from pinching and binding when it's ran through your routes to get to the mechanism, and provides the push and pull strength for like a lever system with an internal cable pulling. That's why everything's got to fit so nice and snug, or snugly, yeah, maybe. So it's like that. Now we can run our cable through, wrap it around and secure it. Similar to a suspension, there's barrel adjusters here to help put that tension against that metallic part inside the cable. That way if you start getting where your shock isn't fully locking out or isn't fully releasing the lock, you can adjust your barrel adjusters to help compensate that and fine tune it so that your suspension is perfect. Let's see if this feed through now gets to the shock. See if I need to replace the cable. I have cables, so it's no big deal. I don't think these are very stretched or anything. I'm gonna find out how they do. And I'm gonna need a new cable because it doesn't go all the way through. Bummer. I thought for sure that this type of a system would be using shifter cables, which is what this is. You see it's a little sturdier, has a bigger nodule on it for shifting because it actually pushes and pulls, whereas your brake wire tends to be a little smaller and a little thinner because the return mechanism on it is actually the spring on the brake. The cables that ran through this are actually brake wires. So that makes it where we need to feed it through here. This is the new cable. And then back through here. And then it seats right in there, like that. Now what we're going to do is feed this through the housing, get it seated in there, or sat in there, hello, proper English. Feed it through this hole. On this side you can actually see it a lot better, hopefully. Screw might need to come out a lot more. This is going to take some editing. Holy moly, look at that. Finally. I'm going to loosen this up just a wee bit. Pull it taut. and then tighten it. I have the barrel adjusters on the lever where they can go both ways, and see how that works. Oh, beautiful. All right, let's do the fork. This cable, feed it through a housing, put it down here into this housing, and mount it just like we did the back one and adjust it, and then we'll show how it works at the end. Okay, I'm not gonna finish just yet. I had to show that I made a mistake so you guys don't make the same mistake. When I went to cut this ferrule, or not this ferrule, this cable, I actually had the liner, hose liner, I actually had my cable in it, so I cut my cable too, so now it's too short, so I have to run another cable. Shame on me. And of course you have to garnish your ends with some anti-fray caps. So I'll put those on and then we'll test out the suspension. There's one anti-fray cap on and everything's fully installed. There's the other one right there. Looking good, looking sharp. I do have some colored zip ties that match the colors of the cables, so I'm going to probably do those up after I do some test rides. It's all installed. Took it for a little test run around the block. Works really well. It added a lot more spaghetti noodle mess at the front end, but like I say, I'll zip tie that up and get it cleaned up. And I'll also run a black anodizing metal paint to make that all pretty. But for the most part, it's done. It made it really nice. I could lower the shock pressure just a little bit and use my lockout for climbing, and that way I had a little less harshness on the downhill. Very nice, super nice. It's nice when you build a bike yourself and you keep making small little improvements and you just fall deeper and deeper in love with your bike. Doggone it, I love it. Remember, we live in exciting times. Ride them. Oh, heavens to Betsy. That's something I knew I wanted, but I didn't know I needed it. Now I've ridden it, and now I found out I needed it. This is fantastic, having remote lockouts.